Okay, let's bring in our guest to discuss the latest developments. In Boston, we have Rami Khouri, who's a distinguished fellow at the American University of Beirut. And in Washington, D.C., we have Mark Kimmitt, who's a retired American general, a former Assistant Secretary for Political Military Affairs. Gents, welcome to you both. And Mark Kimmitt, I'd like to start with you, if I may. So we have, you will have heard, I'm sure, a seventh US serviceman has been killed. If the death toll continues to grow, what difficulties does that create for an administration enthusiastically prosecuting this war?
Well, I think, first of all, we grieve for the family that has lost a soldier in combat. It is the seventh. As they say, every death is a tragedy. 1,000 deaths is a statistic, and I certainly hope we don't have to take that attitude about the loss of life. I want to stay away from that comment because what it does is or answering the question, because what it does is suggest that there's some sort of political usage of these deaths as an excuse to go against the president. But the fact remains is I think most Americans understand the massive threat that comes from a nuclear-armed Iran. And at this point, while it is a tragedy, I think the Americans are willing to accept this cost to finally end the threat that comes from Iran.
Right. Rami Khouri, do you agree with that? And also, it's interesting because we heard from the US Energy Secretary a bit earlier, speaking on American television to try and reassure people that the conflict won't drive up oil prices for long, and they've gone up, 14%, something like that. So there are implications on many levels for US citizens, right?
Well, I agree with General Kimmitt about we all mourn the death of any person from any country in a war situation, and we have thousands to mourn in Lebanon and Iran, and hundreds of thousands in Gaza and Palestine. So that's a universal issue. The other point he made, which I'd like to comment on, is that the people, the whole world see, or the Americans and the world see a great threat in Iran. Most of the world doesn't see this threat. The evidence for it is simply not there. And the way, if there is a threat, the way to deal with it is to resolve it politically, which was underway under the Obama administration, and then Trump stopped it, and then they were negotiating again. So the United States has to rely less on its military and technological power and rely less on the blood-curdling advice it gets from the State of Israel, which wants to go around killing people all over the region, as it's doing now in Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, and Yemen, and Iran. And to really just look at how these tensions really emerged and to resolve them politically through negotiations. The U.S. has done that once or twice in the past, but not very often. It tends to go to its military power first. And then Vietnam was an example, Iraq was an example, Afghanistan was an example, and all of those left behind them a trail of destruction and chaos and terrorism and all kinds of terrible things. So I think it's time for the U.S. to get a better hold, better grip on the realities of what goes on in this region, because there's two certainties in war. One is death and the sorrow that brings, and the other is resistance from the people who are attacked.
Mark Kimmitt, could you respond to that briefly?
Yeah, I would simply say that I agree with Rami on the needs for negotiation, but I think to get back to negotiation, the Iranians are going to have to pay a fairly serious price, which is perhaps make the concessions that they were unwilling to make before. I would comment that I think a significant amount of the world recognizes the threat that would come from 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium being put into dirty bombs, particularly from a regime who has, since 1979, talked about death to America, death to Israel, and, oh, by the way, has been no friends to their neighbors. The fact that in the last set of negotiations, Iran was unwilling to even discuss the issues of proxies, the issues of ballistic missiles, and was trying to fine-tune to the narrowest sense the nuclear talks. It would appear to me that they were trying to revisit the Obama plan and didn't realize that that was a plan unacceptable to President Trump because of the leakage.
All right, let's move on to how this war is turning out at this moment in time. And Rami, we've seen this spread into Lebanon already and elsewhere indeed. Are you concerned also about the potential for an Iranian proxy called the Houthis in Yemen to get involved?
Yeah, I wouldn't call them proxies. I'd call them strategic allies. They're very close to each other and they work together very closely. Iran helped develop the power of Hezbollah and the Ansarullah, the Houthis, and others in the region. So they will probably get involved if they feel threatened. And if they don't get involved now, they're probably going to get attacked again. The U.S. and Israel and Great Britain have already bombed them several times. And so the reality is that the Israelis will not allow any force, whether it's a country, an armed movement, or whatever it is, any force in the greater Middle East and West Asia that resists Israel's hegemonic goal will not allow that to exist. And they'll keep after them and bomb them and bring them down to size and destroy them, regardless of the carnage that's left behind. So I'm not worried about the Ansarullah in Yemen so much getting involved in the war, because they can be checked pretty easily, but they can't be defeated. And this is the deep problem, that if there's one deep problem that the United States has never understood, and I've spent the last 50 years in and out of the United States at university. I was there in Vietnam. I was in and out during Afghanistan. So I know the U.S. Really well, and I am a dual national, American and Jordanian and Palestinian. So I know the U.S. really well. The U.S. system generally, with a few exceptions, just doesn't understand the motivations of people in these countries in the Middle East, and assumes that they will bow down to threats and sanctions and attacks and destruction. And the lesson of history is that that doesn't happen very often.
Mark Kimmett, there's a very real danger, isn't there, of this spiralling? How do you read that, especially given that today we heard from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, who warned that further attacks on Iranian infrastructure will be responded to in kind across this region, the Gulf region. This after, of course, fuel depots were destroyed in Tehran and beyond.
Yeah, I agree with you that there could be further escalation. I also agree with Rami about a couple of the other issues, but with regards to the Houthis, Israel was probably the last country to attack the Houthis. They've been attacked and fought with the Egyptians. They've been attacked and fought against the Emiratis, the Saudis. None of those had anything to do with Israel. So I don't necessarily think that the Houthis are necessarily anti-Israel alone. They're anti a lot of people. And to somehow use vernacular that they're strategic alliance, well, the fact is that the Iranians armed, trained, equipped, and funded the Houthis. If that's not a proxy, then I don't know what is.
Mark Kimmett in Washington, D.C., Rami Khoury in Boston. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. Do appreciate your perspectives both. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You're watching